What was I thinking? Have I really agreed to give a keynote address about resilience to the Area Agency of Aging of Pinellas and Pasco County? Have I really agreed to discuss the most talked about word for the past 18 months? To address the ingredient that most sports teams, especially the Buccaneers and the Rays, use to attribute to their success? Happily and with enthusiasm, I'm here to do just that. Resilience is a major contributor to the survival of senior adult population, not only during the pandemic, but over a lifetime. The same can be said about the resilience as a contributor to the success of the AAA. As an organization, the AAA wrestles with the chaos of life and the survival of aging clients every day. Congratulations to all of you. Healthy aging does require resilience. It requires resilience of the healthcare system, the various levels of healthcare providers, and our patients and clients. I believe resilience is the backbone for the survival of our species. What is resilience? Well, it depends on who you're talking to. Biologists have their definition. Ecologists have a similar one. Physicists have one, but ultimately we speak about the same concept. I like the one I found that psychologists use. Resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. When I think of resilience, I visualize these two images. I'm David Bernstein, and I'm honored to be invited to address such an important topic with you today and this vital organization. I made the decision to study aging and become a geriatrician and focus on preventive care and longevity after reading the National Geographic article associated with the cover picture I just showed. I was additionally influenced by my mother's struggle with the medical care her parents, my grandparents, received late in their lives. My grandparents lived into their late 80s and had several characteristics that have been associated with longevity. They had resilience too. When I graduated from high school, I made a commitment to myself that in addition to becoming a physician, that I would become an author. In 2014, I published my first book. I've got some good news and some bad news. You're old. Tales of a Geriatrician, which is based on my observations of individuals who lived long and healthy lives, demonstrating traits I refer to by using the acronym GRACE. My other books are similarly associated with strategies that promote longevity, and I will provide information about them at the end of my presentation today. Why is resilience so important? And why such a big issue in 2021? This word is also incredibly relevant for successful organizations such as the AAA, which assists seniors every day. Here are some of my observations. For the past year and a half, we have all been living in the perfect storm. COVID, civil unrest, political chaos, high unemployment, healthcare inequities, and economic concerns, to name a few of the factors we wake up to every single day. So not only is this perfect storm affecting us, it's superimposed on the lives of our vulnerable seniors, your clients, my patients. The first question to address today is, how are you and your clients adapting to that adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, and stress? The answer just might be resilience. The National Geographic centenarian and the tortoise have given us clues. But due to time constraints, I will limit my remarks today to resilience and address the Galapagos tortoise and the centenarian at another time and place. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, those of us in the medical field or supportive services thought that our seniors would all succumb to the perfect storm. We were extremely concerned regarding the imposition of social isolation required to avoid exposure to the virus and the psychological consequences in this age group. I'm here to tell you today, it didn't happen that way or the way we expected it would. Why? Because our senior population had much more resilience than we thought they had. And they had more than their younger counterparts. It has been stunning. I've been reading countless articles describing this phenomenon. And I want to repeat myself. Our senior population had more resilience than we thought they had, and they had more than their younger counterparts. I will give you my take on this over the next few moments. My second question for today is, how did this happen? Let me start by telling you about one such woman I provided care to before and during the pandemic. I would like to talk to you and tell you about Estelle. She was born in 1923 in Rhode Island, and at a young age, her family moved to the Bronx, New York. Her grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her parents lived relatively long lives by standards of the times into their 70s and 80s, and her father's smoking may have contributed to her early demise. She and her husband raised 4 children. She worked as a seamstress at a young age and while raising her children. When her children were old enough to attend school, she became a teacher's aide, working into her 80s, always in the setting of special needs children. She retired only when her primary teacher for many years took a medical leave. She took care of herself by eating a healthy diet, exceeding whatever was considered healthy at the time. She led an active life, but was not overtly athletic. She incorporated transcendental meditation into her life and the lives of her children in the 1970s, which is really quite phenomenal. She found it played a pivotal role in her life, helping her to remain balanced. She realized at an early age maintaining a positive attitude would have favorable impacts on her life, and practicing that paid her dividends. She expressed gratitude toward others her entire life. At the age of 94, while assisting another resident with coffee in the dining room of her assisted independent living facility, she fractured her hip and fell to the ground. She had successful surgery, awoke from anesthesia, and the remainder of the 3-day hospitalization and 20-day rehab stint were uneventful. With a little help from her family, she returned to her independent living facility directly from rehab. That's amazing. So, more questions to ask. What can we learn from Estelle and others like her? What can we look for in our clients, and how can we adapt ourselves to flourish with resilience in the years to come? Well, here's what I discovered. A few years ago, I had been digesting some research findings presented at a geriatric conference. The investigators were measuring resilience in the geriatric population. They were using words similar to the words I use to describe my patients who were aging successfully. I found it was very intriguing. They were measuring the same characteristics in their senior population that I observed contributed to longer lives in my patients. After reflecting on their research, I realized that independently, I had developed my own take on resilience. I invite you to see what you think. As I begin my take on resilience, please indulge me for a moment as I digress and I explain how I arrived at the 5-letter acronym GRACE. In medical school, we learned a lot of mnemonic devices as a way to remember all the trivial and important information about diseases. Because of my experience in dealing with physicians and patients, I've made a point of limiting any of my lists nowadays to just 5 items. My reasoning is that most people, including doctors, cannot remember more than 5 items on any given list. Besides, I have 5 fingers on each hand. I rely on 5 senses for my survival. And there were 5 members of my family growing up. So remembering 5 items works for me. During my 40-year career, I observed that individuals with resilience and longevity demonstrated 5 traits which I developed the acronym GRACE. As I review these traits, reflect on your family, friends, and senior clients who have aged gracefully, and the features you could incorporate in your lives to do the same. G stands for goals, such as having a goal or a purpose in life. R stands for roots. This has 2 meanings. One has to do with DNA and genes, and the other has to do with developing and maintaining deep roots within a family, business, or organization. The AAA is an example of an organization with deep roots in the community. A stands for attitude and gratitude. Having a positive attitude and expressing gratitude is a clear influencer of better physical and mental health and resilience. C stands for companionship. It has been clearly shown that people live longer and thrive when they have some sort of companionship, a spouse, children, close friends who provide love and affection and can provide physical and emotional support if and when needed. E stands for environment. This is a broad category and it has to do with the environment in which we live and the environment within us, our bodies, and how we can take care of each. Now let's return to Estelle and consider what I think contributed to her successful aging and her resilience. Estelle had goals and a purpose in life, raising a family, and when opportunities arose for her to contribute to her family, she took a job as a seamstress. When her children matured, she became a teaching assistant. More recently, her setting a goal to return to independent living after a rehab is yet another example of setting and maintaining goals in life. Estelle recognized that her family had good roots in DNA and genes that led to a longer life, and she lived her life accordingly, not forsaking her good genes and DNA. Now, I want to make an important point here. Just because a person has bad genes does not mean he or she is doomed. What it means is that they have to make changes in their lives to offset bad genes. There's an appropriate quote from the famous author Jack London that addresses dealing with a bad hand of cards that I believe applies here. He said, "Life is not always a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes playing a poor hand well." Estelle had a great attitude, filled with generosity and gratitude. With regard to companionship, she worked to have a solid relationship with her husband and has always been close with her children and extended family. She maintained close bonds with the teachers she assisted with over the years. When it came to environment, Estelle was not much for formal exercise, but you can bet your bottom dollar being a teacher's assistant required a lot of energy. She and her entire family practiced transcendental meditation basically all their lives. It should be no surprise to my audience today that within the category of environment, I present and recommend 5 additional areas for intentional change we can all make to improve resilience and our health span. Here are my 5 recommendations to improve your environment. Get more sleep, sweat, and socialization, and reduce your stress and your sugars, sweets, and carbohydrates. Ultimately, this is the subject of my book, The Power of 5, the ultimate formula for longevity and remaining youthful. As a result of my research during the past year regarding COVID and the pandemic, there is an unexpected dividend of applying these 5 recommendations as they can mitigate the severity and reduce the mortality associated with COVID. There's a second component that I attribute to senior resilience. It relates to the senior's response to major life changes, including isolation during the pandemic. I believe this is a generational effect. Estelle and others in her age group grew up sacrificing a lot in life. Resilience and acceptance were a way of life. Most lived through, in some way, experienced the Great Depression and World War II. In addition to learning how to delay gratification, they raised a generation of baby boomers to do the same. Both of these generations became self-sufficient, and they were proud of it. They responded to the need to solve their own problems because there was no one else to do it otherwise. They were creative and addressed challenges with common sense and ingenuity. I know this from observing my patients and employees from this generation and how they dealt with adversity. My older patients managed their time socially isolated with greater ease than their children and individuals in younger generations. In a relative sense, they took it all in stride. In a lot of ways, that's what people with resilience and who have healthy aging strategies do. Now we come to the last and probably most important question for us to consider today. What can we do with this information? For our senior clients, for our aging parents, for ourselves, and for the organization we work with, the AAA. Well, with regard to our senior clients, while working with clients, you have the opportunity to exhibit even greater empathy and interest in their condition. I would recommend incorporating GRACE questions as scripted or unscripted component of all your initial and annual interviews. It could provide insights that you might not have considered before, enabling you to enhance the lives and health of each client. It might open up areas for expression of pride or areas to address for improvement within the client. With regard to our aging parents, we can gain insight into what makes them tick and areas to engage in conversation to enhance their lives, their longevity, and their health span. Specifically for the AAA, to reflect upon how we maintain health, physical, mental, and resilience of the organization and its workforce. How can we apply grace to the boardroom? With regard to ourselves, develop a new game plan, incorporating these 5 traits for longer, healthier lives. How can we apply grace in our homes, with our family members, or even in our kitchens? This could make us better providers of service for our clients as well. Now is the time to incorporate grace or resilience into your personal, family, organizational, and professional lives. There is a final and very important ingredient that must be included in this process, and that is it must be done with intention. We must take a close look at our families, ourselves, our clients, and this organization and make intentional changes. It won't happen by osmosis. It won't knock at our door. It won't happen because it would be a good idea. We have to intentionally incorporate grace wherever we go. So after this keynote address and the annual meeting, I recommend reflecting on the areas in your lives where you can add grace with intention. As I close, I want to provide you with my website and email address. I'm very proud of the material I have posted about aging, longevity, and recommendations for remaining youthful. There is a tab on the homepage titled Food Blog. My wife Melissa has posted almost 100 healthy recipes. In addition, feel free to use my email to address any of your questions you might have regarding today's presentation. I have thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity of sharing my thoughts with you today and appreciate the opportunity of being invited.